The thing about suburban perfection is that it always looks better from across the street. The lawns are trimmed to regulation height, the garden flags flap like patriotic Pinterest boards, and the driveways glisten with freshly sprayed concrete sealant. From far enough away, you'd think the whole neighborhood smelled like lemon polish and pure intentions. Up close, though, you start noticing the cracks, literal and social. Last week, Mrs. Dempsey on Oak Ridge Lane called the HOA because someone's trash bin lid wasn't fully closed. The week before that, somebody anonymously mailed a highlighted copy of the community parking rules to the new couple who dared to own a slightly beige SUV instead of an approved shade of grey. That is the kind of place I live in. A place that thinks clean sidewalks equal clean lives. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Which is probably why I didn't spot the problem right away. When everything is polished, even the rot shines. Ethan first started coming home late in what I would now call the soft launch phase. That's when a man lays the groundwork for deception, but carefully, so he can later act shocked when you question it. It started with something harmless. Client dinner ran long, or market's crazy, babe, had to wine and dine the investors. He'd say it with this performance voice, like a politician shaking a baby he didn't want to hold. I didn't analyze it. I was too busy finishing freelance projects and pretending that being your own boss is glamorous when it actually means you're a barista, accountant, and therapist for yourself all at once. Then came the cologne. Not just any cologne. Ethan had never cared about that stuff before. He used to smell like whatever soap was cheapest in the multi-pack. Suddenly, he smelled like a magazine sample for people who buy leather chairs to age naturally under skylights. Expensive, strong, too much of it. When I asked why he smelled like a department store display, he said, "Client hugged me. Long meeting. She was French." He said it like French explained everything, as if being European gave someone special permission to rub fragrance onto your collarbone. I laughed. He did not. That was the first flare in the sky. Small but burning. The second came 3 days later, when he brought his phone with him to get the mail. Not just in his pocket. He held it in his hand like he was guarding nuclear codes. It buzzed, and he angled the screen away from me so fast he knocked over the potted fern I'd spent an hour resoiling that morning. He picked it up, apologized to the plant before he apologized to me, and then pretended he didn't hear me ask who texted. Something in me took a picture of that moment. Not literally, but mentally, like a courtroom exhibit waiting for its turn. But the real confirmation, the one that removed all doubt, arrived by email on a quiet Tuesday morning while I was editing a logo for a dentist who insisted on combining family comfort with modern tooth energy. I was deep in font frustration when I got a purchase confirmation from a luxury store Ethan and I had never stepped foot in. The kind of store where they wrap perfumes like jewelry and ship them to people who say things like, "I only drink espresso flights." Price, $312. Message on gift tag, "You deserve this." Shipping address, not ours. I stared at it, not moving, not panicking, just existing in a new version of reality I hadn't fully entered yet. Then I opened a map, pasted the address, and zoomed in. Upscale condo building, near the river, rooftop lounge, metallic balconies, the kind of property you only get if you're rich, divorced, or delusional. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even stand up. I took a screenshot, filed it into a folder titled Branding Research, and poured myself coffee so strong it tasted like revenge concentrate. That's when the first joke formed in my head. Not a funny one exactly, but the kind of joke you think of when the universe hands you an insult with perfect handwriting. "Client hug," I whispered, staring at the email. "Sure. And I suppose the client also hugged him so hard, her scent required overnight express shipping. I checked our shared cloud, not because I expected treasure, but because Ethan never updated his settings. He treated technology like something that magically worked because he believed in it hard enough. Which is how I found the synced album he didn't know still existed, a batch of photos, taken inside a condo, designer mirrors, modern art, woman in reflection, not me. She looked about 28, hair that had never known frizz, the kind of outfit that says effortless, but costs the same as my entire laptop setup. She was photographing a marble coffee table with 2 wine glasses on it. Ethan was on the couch, blurred in the background, wearing the same shirt that later came home smelling like a client. I did not zoom in. I didn't need to. That's the moment something inside me didn't break, but rearranged. Anger didn't hit me like a storm. It landed like paperwork. Collated, stamped, official. I closed the album, opened a new document and titled it Project Accountability. Step 1, observe. Step 2, confirm. Step 3, strategize. I'm not the dramatic type. I don't throw wine glasses or torch wedding albums in the backyard. I don't scream accusations while mascara melts down my face. My rage is spreadsheet-based. My heartbreak has bullet points. My revenge, beta-tested. That night, I waited until Ethan got home. He came in smelling like the cologne again, but fresher, like he'd reapplied in the car. His smile was polished. His eyes were tired. He kissed my forehead, the way someone pats a house pet they forgot they owned. "How was the meeting?" I asked. He loosened his tie like a man in a commercial. "Draining. The market's brutal." "Networking dinner?" I asked, casually, like I wasn't already aware of the wine glasses and the marble table and the woman who definitely wasn't French. "You know how it is," he said, exhaling deeply. "Client hugged me again, actually. Same one. Strong perfume. Sorry if it lingers." I stepped in and hugged him before he expected it, pressed my face against his collar. "Oh," I said, pulling back. "It definitely lingers." He laughed. I smiled back. Both expressions were lies. We ate dinner. He talked about sales projections and market trends. I nodded, made comments, and mentally drafted legal phrasing. After he went to shower, I sat at my computer again. New entry in the document. Step 4, acquire leverage. Step 5, weaponize reality. Step 6, invoice appropriately. And that's when I heard it. Ethan singing in the shower. Not a sad song, not a conflicted one. Something upbeat and smug. Something that confirmed he wasn't worried, wasn't cautious, wasn't even imagining the possibility that I knew. And that's when I smiled for real, for the first time that day. That was when the plan stopped being a survival instinct and became a project, a creative one, something I could outline, polish, and execute. Because if he thought a client hug was an acceptable explanation, then I was absolutely going to send him a receipt. The next morning, I woke up before him, made coffee, and opened the project file again. Step 7, turn evidence into narrative. Step 8, control perception before he does. Step 9, never let him see the punch coming. He wandered into the kitchen half awake, kissed my head, stole my mug and said, "You're up early." "Work," I said. "Busy week." "Oh," I said, looking at him over my laptop. "You have no idea." Then I clicked save, and that's when the story really started. Not the cheating, that was the prequel. The real beginning was the moment I decided I wasn't going to be the stunned wife in the third act. I was going to be the narrator, the writer, the one holding the pen while the polished suburban scenery behind me quietly prepared to crack. He had no clue. They never do. And the funniest part, he still smelled like that perfume, which meant he gave me the perfect opening line to the story I was already drafting in my head. He claimed the perfume on his shirt was from a client hug, so I sent him an invoice, and eventually he paid it. The first thing I did after project accountability was born was clean the kitchen. That might sound strange, but when I need to think, I scrub. The tile grout has witnessed most of my life decisions. There's something about wiping a countertop that makes the chaos in my head line up like soldiers. Also, I needed to look convincingly normal. People who plan revenge shouldn't look like they're planning revenge. They should look like they're comparing detergent brands and debating sourdough starters. Ethan left early for work that day. He kissed me on the cheek again, left his mug in the sink and asked, "You good?" "Never better," I said, because technically it was true. Clarity can be oddly refreshing. Once the garage door closed, I opened my laptop and began step 1, evidence acquisition. Our shared cloud account was a goldmine of unintentional transparency. Ethan was the kind of man who thought clearing cache was an advanced concept. There were backup folders, synced messages, and location data from his smartwatch. By noon, I had a timeline. Every networking dinner, every late night, every lie dressed as professionalism. The pattern was almost artful, like a minimalist painting you didn't understand until someone explained the hidden symmetry. At lunch, I took a drive to the downtown address from the Perfume receipt. The building gleamed with the kind of smug architecture that screams, "Someone overpaid." Chrome doors, valet parking, a concierge who looked like she could spot deceit at 50 paces. I wore my favorite structured blazer, the one that says, "I invoice for creativity, not apologies," and a name tag that read, "Lila Green, brand consultant." I even printed a fake card that matched the logo of a real marketing agency. Old habits die hard. I make fake identities look like luxury packaging. Inside, I smiled like someone who belonged there. "Hi," I said. "I'm consulting on the building's new visual identity. Do you happen to know who handles the condo association's design materials?" She was polite but bored. "You'll want security for that. Third door on the left." Perfect. The security office was actually just a desk with too many monitors. The man behind it looked 23 and powered by caffeine fumes. I launched into my pitch. "We're creating a community spotlight for residents. A visual story, you know. Could I see a few sample clips from the lobby camera? Need to confirm lighting consistency before we bring in photographers." He hesitated, then shrugged. "Sure, everyone loves a branding story." He spun one monitor toward me and opened a playback screen. "Just don't tell anyone I helped. We're supposed to protect privacy." "Oh, absolutely," I said, smiling. "I'm all about privacy." And there it was, my confirmation in 4K resolution. Ethan, 2 nights ago, walking through the lobby with a woman wearing a white coat and heels sharp enough to slice silence. They laughed as if the whole world existed to amuse them. He pressed the elevator button for her and said something that made her touch his arm. Then the doors closed, and the timestamp blinked like a smirk. "Lighting's great," I said lightly. "You're doing a fantastic job." By the time I left the building, the autumn air felt cleaner somehow. Not because anything moral had happened, nothing about this was moral, but because truth is an excellent disinfectant. Back home, I made a folder on my desktop. Client materials. Inside it, I saved every receipt, photo, and timestamp. I didn't name the files dramatically. No smoking gun JPG. Just neat labels like invoice proof par yen and branding proposal 2B. Organized chaos is my specialty. 2 days later, Ethan announced another late dinner. I said, "Of course," and even packed him a protein bar because presentation matters. As soon as he left, I called our bank's fraud department and calmly said, "I'd like to temporarily restrict secondary access to our joint account due to suspicious spending behavior." The representative sounded sympathetic. "Fraud is stressful," she said. I almost laughed. If only she knew how creatively stressful it could be. Step 5 was outreach, specifically to Hannah Reid. I found her business email on her design website. The photos of her work were painfully tasteful. Neutral palettes, geometric vases, furniture that looked allergic to fingerprints. Her About Me page described her as passionate about balance and modern storytelling through space. I almost admired the phrasing. It takes skill to sound profound while saying nothing. I drafted a letter, friendly, polite, handwritten, because handwriting carries weight in a world of screens. It read, "Congratulations on your shared debt. Please find enclosed copies of the prenuptial agreement indicating that all assets connected to my husband's income are now classified under voidable claims due to confirmed infidelity. Wishing you balance and storytelling through space. Warm regards, Lila Bennett." I printed it, slipped in photocopies of the relevant pages, and mailed it first class. Sometimes revenge smells like envelope glue. The following afternoon, I ran into our neighbor Claudia, the HOA president and self-appointed social historian of the block. "Lila, darling," she said, eyes glinting. "Ethan got a big client, didn't he? Saw him at that new steakhouse. Looked positively radiant." "Networking dinner," I said with a smile that could cut glass. "He's expanding his portfolio." She leaned closer. "Well, good for him. You two have always seemed stable." "Stability is our brand," I replied. She laughed, unaware that she'd just given me my next post tagline. That night, I set the stage online. On my professional page, the one where clients follow me for design tips and sarcastic commentary, I wrote, "He claimed the perfume on his shirt was from a client hug, so I sent him an invoice for emotional damages. His girlfriend liked it, before realizing I was talking about her too." Attached was a clean, beautifully formatted PDF mock-up. An invoice for emotional damages, listing line items like wasted years of strategic support, $28,000, and collateral social humiliation, $12,500. Each entry had dates, subtotals, and a final note, payment received via public accountability. I tagged him, and her. By morning, the post had exploded. The local community forum had a thread titled "The Designer Who Invoiced Her Husband's Ego." People loved it. Comments ranged from iconic to "this is art." Someone even asked to buy the design as a print. Ethan texted me 3 times during his commute. 1. "What is this post?" 2. "Take it down now." 3. "You're overreacting." I replied only once. Invoices are documentation, not emotion. When he came home that evening, he looked less radiant. His tie was crooked, his eyes sharp. "Do you realize clients saw that?" he demanded. "I do," I said calmly. "Transparency is important in business." He ran a hand through his hair, muttering, "You've made this a circus." "Correction," I said. "You supplied the elephants. I just opened the tent." He glared at me for a long moment, then stormed into his office, slamming the door. Through the thin wall, I could hear him making frantic phone calls, probably to his firm, maybe to her. I almost felt sorry for the noise. Almost. Later that night, I scrolled through the post again. Over 600 comments, most supportive, a few disapproving, but all engaged. Engagement metrics are power. And for once, I was trending for something other than interior mood boards. I sipped wine and stared out at the perfect lawns under the streetlights. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Peaceful, orderly, ignorant. But I could feel the shift. Gossip was blooming invisibly across those manicured hedges. Somewhere, Claudia was probably whispering over decaf. I heard she invoiced him. Can you imagine? Yes, Claudia, I can. When I finally went to bed, Ethan was already asleep, turned away from me, breathing evenly. I looked at his back and thought how strange it was to share a bed with a stranger you built from scratch. Then I opened my phone and checked the notification again. Hannah had liked the post, hours earlier, before realizing. The moment she unliked it, I screenshotted the notification. Another souvenir. By morning, I'd drafted the next steps in my head. Ethan would soon realize the financial implications, the locked account, the clause in the prenup, the shift in his professional standing. He would try to explain. He would beg for privacy. He'd say, "Let's talk about this like adults." But he wouldn't understand that adults pay their invoices. When I walked past him that morning, dressed for a client meeting of my own, he asked, "Where are you off to?" "Rebranding," I said with a smile. "For who?" "You'll see soon," I said, picking up my keys. "Consider it part of our shared narrative arc." As I drove away, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Every piece of evidence, every sarcastic post, every whispered rumor was now part of a system, a campaign. And if there's one thing I'm good at, it's making sure the story matches the visuals. He thought he could hide behind charm and contracts. But stories, real stories, belong to the person who tells them first. And I was just getting started. The neighborhood found out before Ethan did. That was the part that entertained me the most. Not the cheating, not the receipts, not even the dramatic timing of the invoice post. What fascinated me was how fast suburban information travels when people sense a scandal that doesn't involve them personally. There's a kind of hunger in a quiet neighborhood that has nothing to do with actual food. People don't crave peace. They crave entertainment that doesn't put them in legal trouble. By 7:30 in the morning, I already had 3 texts from people who had absolutely no business knowing anything about my marriage. Claudia, who lived across the street and once tried to report a lawn gnome violation to the HOA, messaged me, "Saw your post, legendary. Also, did you design the invoice template yourself? It's elegant." I didn't answer, but I did smile. Claudia is the kind of woman who once cried over a chipped casserole dish, but would absolutely live-stream a public meltdown if allowed. She was now treating me like a performance artist. 2 minutes later, Jennifer from book club texted, "Lila, I always knew something was off. Tell me everything. I'll bring muffins." Translation: she didn't know a thing, but she wanted to be the first person to say she did once it became history. The third message came from someone I barely remembered meeting at a baby shower 3 years ago. She sent a single sentence. "Is this about who I think it's about?" I responded with a thumbs-up emoji, because if there's one thing that amplifies mystery more than anything, it's silence wearing a polite expression. I hadn't even had coffee yet. The funniest part, I hadn't said Ethan's name in the post. The internet and the cul-de-sac connected the dots in under 6 seconds. Turns out people always suspect something before they know something. They just need permission to admit it. Around 9 a.m., the suburb hit stage 2, performative concern. I walked outside to get the mail, and suddenly, people who normally only nodded at me, like we were both lying about liking each other, were waving like we shared a trauma bond. A woman jogging with an aggressively enthusiastic golden retriever slowed her pace just enough to open the door to conversation. "Hey, Lila, you look amazing. How are you holding up?" There it was, the phrase people use when they hope you're a wreck so they can describe it later. I smiled. "Holding up just fine. Actually sleeping better. Scandal is very clarifying." She blinked, smiled a little too wide, and jogged away at double speed, probably to report back to her fitness group that I wasn't crying into throw pillows. By 10 o'clock, my invoice post had hit 4,000 shares. Someone turned it into a meme with glittery fonts that said, "Emotional damages, itemized, finalized, monetized." Another person turned it into a t-shirt mock-up. Someone else captioned it as "the female tax collector of karma." A journalist messaged me asking if I was available for an interview. A podcast requested a segment titled "The Administrative Side of Revenge." Someone sent me a TikTok of a woman reenacting my invoice in a courtroom robe. Meanwhile, Ethan, subject of this entire suburban Broadway play, hadn't sent a single word. The silence was telling. When men like him go quiet, it's not because they've accepted defeat. It's because they're busy making phone calls to people they think still respect them. At 11:45, I got a message from Spencer, Ethan's co-worker and self-proclaimed closer, a man who thinks real estate is a personality trait. You didn't hear this from me, but things are getting nuclear over here. Clients are asking questions. The senior partners saw the post. I wrote back, tell them I can invoice them too if needed. He didn't reply. That's how you know the comedy hit nerve tissue. An hour later, someone filmed Ethan in the lobby of his office tower, pacing while holding his phone like he was trying to negotiate with gravity. The video had a caption, "When your wife becomes your PR crisis." Comments poured in. How did he think he would hide this? Bro lost a woman and a joint account in 24 hours. The perfume on the shirt excuse aged like unrefrigerated dairy. I watched it twice, not to feel triumphant, just to confirm the timeline of his downfall. Phase 2 was officially complete, public humiliation and professional instability. Now his peers, clients and potential future employers were all tying strings between his name and the perfume gift wrapping paper. That's the thing about cheating. The act is private, but the fallout is always public. People don't destroy you. They just stop defending you. At 2 p.m., the mistress finally spoke. Not to me, of course. That would have required courage. No, she posted a Notes app-styled statement on Instagram. I am stepping away from negative narratives and choosing love and healing. She included a sunflower emoji for moral decoration. I could practically smell the essential oils through the screen. I didn't comment. I didn't react. I didn't need to. 5 minutes later, she messaged me privately. This is getting out of control. You've made us both targets. Can we talk? I typed back, you've been talking. I've just been publishing. Then I muted her. Around 4 p.m., the entire street behaved like someone had scheduled a neighborhood surveillance hour. People watered plants they normally let the rain handle. Someone washed their car with no soap, just vibes. A group of teens biked past slowly, staring at me like I was Netflix. I didn't hide. I walked right up my driveway with a tote bag and sunglasses like someone who could absolutely monetize a scandal if necessary. And then, finally, Ethan came home. Not swaggering, not smiling, not even rehearsed, just existing in the defeated posture of a man who once believed consequences were for other people. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie was stuffed into his pocket. He looked like someone who had been told repeatedly by multiple sources that he was, in fact, the problem. You're trending, he said, voice flat. I know, I replied. People really respond well to thorough documentation. You made me look like a clown. I didn't make you anything, I said. You arrived already in costume. I just provided lighting. His jaw tightened. Clients are cancelling meetings. The firm is freaking out. I'm being harassed. You were hugged by a client, Ethan, I said. Surely you're used to close contact. He didn't like that one. You could have talked to me privately, he said. I did, I said. Every time I asked a question and you lied, that was a conversation. You failed the oral exam. He started pacing, like movement would make the truth less stationary. You're blowing up our life. No, I corrected. I'm dissolving an illusion. Entirely different process. Then came his desperation pivot. Every narcissistic man has one. This affects you too, you know. It did, I said, but I planned ahead. You're just now discovering consequences have paperwork. He stopped. Finally really looked at me. Not angry, actually frightened. The kind of fear that comes when someone sees the blueprint of their own downfall and recognizes the handwriting. What are you going to do next, he asked. Nothing, I said. Phase 2 is complete. The rest will happen on its own. He stared. He didn't understand yet. Of course he didn't. Because here's what people like him never grasp. Sometimes the most strategic move is to stop pushing. Let the world do the pushing for you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. I didn't bargain. I just stood still long enough for him to realize something terrifying. I wasn't even angry anymore. Anger is loud, power is quiet. He walked out of the room without responding, and for the first time since the cheating started, I didn't follow him. I didn't explain. I didn't soothe. I didn't negotiate. I just let him sit in the empty space where my tolerance used to live. Later that night, after the neighborhood lights dimmed and the group chats went back to whatever people talk about when nobody's marriage is exploding, I checked the post again. It had crossed 100,000 shares. Someone had created a hashtag with my name. A content creator made a dramatic reading of the invoice using courtroom music. A lawyer offered me a free consultation for entertainment value. And as I scrolled the comments, I saw the exact turning point I'd been waiting for. She didn't ruin him, she just stopped protecting him. That was it. The shift. The public now understood the real story. I locked my phone, turned off the lamp, and said out loud, not to anyone, just to the room, "He thinks this was the revenge." It wasn't. This was the appetizer. The real revenge? That would begin when everything he thought he had left started slipping away. Not because I took it, because he no longer had access to me. Power isn't burning someone's life. Power is unplugging them from the source they never realized they depended on. And I hadn't even started pulling the real plugs yet. When people say everything has consequences, they never mean them in the satisfying, spreadsheet-ready way I do. They mean it philosophically, softly, like a lesson in a children's show. They mean, one day, maybe, life will balance out. No, real consequences are not poetic, they're logistical. They come in the form of frozen accounts, contract withdrawals, and group chats renamed without you, which is exactly the kind of week Ethan was now having. The morning after the office lobby video started circulating, I woke up to 3 messages from Spencer, the coworker who previously treated empathy like a rare mineral. The first message was a cautious, "Leela, you around?" The second, "Things are getting messy here." The third, an hour later, "Hannah just came to the office. You should have seen the look on her face when she realized everyone already knew." I smiled at that last one. Not a triumphant smile. More like the slow, satisfied kind you get when a project is unfolding exactly on schedule. I made oatmeal, answered client emails, and opened the bank app just to admire the restricted status still in place on our joint account. I had transferred the remaining funds into a personal business account 3 days before, under the legal reasoning of protective separation of assets. The banker had called it a smart precaution. Ethan would call it something else if he ever got access again. Spoiler, he wouldn't. Around noon, I drove to the grocery store for the most underrated activity in the world, passive observation. One of the benefits of a suburban scandal is that the aisles of a well-lit supermarket turn into a public opinion court. People you barely know suddenly feel like they're at a live podcast recording, performing whispers for an invisible audience. As soon as I walked in to produce, a woman from 2 streets over nearly crashed into her cart trying to look casual. "Lila, hi, I was just thinking of you." No, she wasn't. She was thinking about the invoice, and whether her own husband had ever bought perfume for someone who didn't legally share a mortgage with him. "Just grabbing ingredients," I said, holding up a lemon like a tiny alibi. She leaned in, eyes gleaming the way eyes gleam when they've been waiting their whole suburban lives for an unsanctioned plot twist. "Is it true? The post? The invoice?" "It's documented," I said simply, and watched the thrill ripple through her spine, like I'd just handed her a premium cable subscription. By aisle 4, 2 more women found excuses to comment on how strong I was. Strength, in their minds, was synonymous with posted something spicy enough to read aloud in a wine circle. That's when I realized something important. People don't just consume scandal. They rehearse it, they retell it, they translate it into their own vocabulary until they feel like co-authors. And that's exactly what I wanted. When I got back home, I found Ethan in the kitchen, staring at his open laptop. His hair was a little messier than usual, and he was wearing a wrinkled shirt that looked like it had lost the will to participate in his life. "Can we talk?" he asked. "We can speak," I corrected, "but talking implies mutual interest." He ignored the jab. "I checked the account. Why is it locked?" "Fraud precaution," I said, spreading cream cheese on a bagel with the calm of someone spreading cement over a future tombstone. Too many unexplained luxury purchases linked to our household. That perfume wasn't fraud. "It wasn't honesty either," I said, "and banks don't have a checkbox for emotional betrayal, so I used the next closest category." He shut the laptop harder than necessary. "You don't understand how much trouble I'm in." "Oh, I do," I said. "I'm just not volunteering for it." He stood still, processing this new version of me. He used to speak to me like someone confident he'd win the argument with charm. Now he looked like a man trying to guess which wire to cut on a device he built himself. "I have meetings tomorrow. Bigger clients. I need access to the account." "You'll need different wording," I said. "Try using had instead of have." "You think this is funny?" I took a bite of the bagel and gestured slightly. "I think it's fair." He stared at me again, in that quiet panic way that had replaced his usual smugness. For a split moment, I wondered if he was calculating how many things he could still salvage. Then I realized he hadn't even begun to understand what he'd lost. An hour later, I left for my next task, staging the quiet part of revenge. Not the public explosion, Phase 2 had handled that, but the strategic tightening of screws so subtle he wouldn't even hear the thread stripping until everything collapsed. Which is how I ended up in the lobby of his firm's building, the same place where the video of his pacing had gone viral. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I was there to be seen. Nothing prompts speculation faster than the presence of a calm woman who shouldn't have a reason to be there. I walked up to the receptionist and smiled. "Hi, I'm dropping off documents for Ethan Bennett." She glanced at the envelope I handed her, thick, legal-looking, labeled Asset Adjustment Documents. It contained nothing of legal value, just blank printer paper, but optics, like gossip, doesn't require truth. It only requires implication. "Should I tell him you're here?" she asked. "Not necessary," I said. "He'll understand what this means." I left before she even finished blinking. By the time Ethan returned from his meeting and saw my delivery waiting on his desk, I wanted him to feel one thing: observed, not attacked, not threatened, just watched. Awareness is a silent form of pressure. That evening, Hannah became Phase 3.5. She didn't know it yet, which made it more satisfying. She posted a photo of herself at a cafe, captioned with an inspirational quote about resilience. I replied privately with one sentence: "Resilience is easier when the condo loan isn't about to flip back to your name." It took her 90 seconds to reply. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, Hannah." I sent her a screenshot of a public record search showing that Ethan had used his name, not his company's, to co-sign the purchase, which meant if he defaulted, her life became one long renovation she couldn't afford. No insults. No gloating, just data, clean, sharp, devastating. 10 minutes later, she blocked me. Not a problem. Blocking doesn't erase mortgages. That night, I updated my project document. Step 10, make sure they turn on each other. Step 11, stay still long enough for the guilt to echo. While I typed, I heard muffled voices from Ethan's office. His phone was on speaker again. He was arguing with someone, probably her. I didn't need to hear the words. I already knew the script. She was blaming him. He was blaming me, both pretending they didn't build this mess together brick by brick. Around 9, he walked into the living room. He didn't look angry this time. He looked cornered. "She's cutting me off," he said. "Ironic," I said, "since cutting me off is what got you here." He didn't respond, just stared at the floor. And that's when I realized something important. He wasn't afraid of losing her. He was afraid of losing the version of himself he imagined he was while he had her. I stood up, walked past him, and paused just long enough to say, "Don't look at me like I wrecked your life. I just turned the lights on." I left him there, silent, confused, and finally without an audience. The next morning, I moved on to the physical portion of this chapter of revenge. No, not what you're thinking. Nothing unlawful. Just a little property-based reality adjustment. I drove to Hannah's condo building parking deck, not to vandalize anything. That would have been too obvious and too illegal. I simply placed a printed copy of the mortgage document under her windshield wiper with a cheerful neon sticky note. Reminder, shared luxury is still a liability. Then, on my way out, I took a slow walk past her designer car and accidentally dragged my house key along the side of it. Not enough to destroy it, just enough to make it visible, irritating, and very expensive. Consequence delivered in satin gloves. Driving home, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt focused. That's the difference between chaos and strategy. Chaos wants noise. Strategy wants end results. As I turned the key in our front door, I made a mental note. Step 12. Let them both feel the cost in places that can't be refunded. Because money can be replaced. Reputation can be rebuilt. But inconvenience is the tax that revenge collects with interest. And by the looks of it, both of them were about to start paying. He called me unhinged once, when I accused him of lying about a client. He said it like an observation, the kind you make about a lawn ornament that's leaning, and therefore somehow morally suspect. I would later think of that day as his last honest comment. Honest, because it revealed what he expected of me. Calm compliance, quiet correction, a woman who bows when things get rough and then apologizes for taking up floor space. By the time this chapter begins, unhinged was a compliment in my personal lexicon. The morning started with paperwork and pettiness in equal measure. I woke, made coffee, and signed a document that moved the last of our joint investments into an account I controlled. The financial advisor used words like protective structure and short-term liquidity, and I nodded like someone who'd been to more than one meeting with lawyers. In truth, I'd only skimmed the legal jargon, but I knew enough. Once money is rerouted and signatures are notarized, the theater of power shifts. Contracts are not poetry, they are scaffolding. Rip out enough boards and the scaffolding tilts. Ethan noticed the change in our balance before he noticed the change in our marriage. Men like him measure success in numbers until the numbers stop being convenient. When funds vanished from his reach, his ego discovered the unpleasant arithmetic of consequence. He came home bristling with rehearsed lines about privacy and professional embarrassment, but those were just exhalations, air that didn't hold shape. What he did next was more interesting. He stopped performing and started bargaining. Bargaining is the first stage of panic, and panic is the soft underbelly of rational men who believe themselves unassailable. "You can't do this," he said, voice low as if we were in a courtroom, but wanted to keep our comments off the record. "You mean legally?" I asked. "Because if you mean morally, I think we're both familiar with the ledger." He picked up his phone and thumbed something. Probably a message to a colleague meant to move a rumor into the realm of misunderstood. He walked around the kitchen table like he was pacing through the memory of our life, testing tiles to see which ones might be hollow. "Let's talk," he said finally. "Just the two of us. No posts, no friends." "No," I said. "Why?" He sounded small, like someone who'd lost the heavy coat that made him look bigger in a crowd. "Because we used to talk." "We talked while you bought things for other people," I said. "You treated the house like a showroom, and our marriage like an open house. This isn't about posts, it's about accountability." He sighed and left the room. The sound he made was not angry. It was not even weary. It was the sound of someone suddenly aware that they were an actor whose script had been swapped without consent. "That afternoon," he called, begging for a private conversation. He came to the house anyway, rain threatening, but not arriving yet, storm weather that smells like a preface. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, fingers knotting and unknotting. The desperation-sharpened lines I'd always known were there. They simply had never been the leading feature. "Please," he said, "let's do this quietly." I leaned back and watched him try to deploy charm like a flashlight against truth. It seemed insufficient. It was insufficient. "All right," I said finally, "but it's recorded, for clarity." His lip twitched. "You're going to record me?" "For your benefit," I said. "And mine." We both knew he'd say the same things either way. Apologies that softened, excuses that reeked of self-preservation, promises that smelled faintly like next quarter's projections. I pressed record on my phone and left it where the camera could see him. Recording this was not malicious. It was documentation. My voice in the future would not be a blur of emotion. It would be a timestamp. He started with the usual. "It's not what it looks like." He fumbled with metaphors about work stress and proximity and human error. He spoke with the practiced cadence of a man who'd made a career of smoothing jagged edges. Then he tried a new line. "Help me. Don't destroy me." At "don't destroy me," my hands tightened around the mug until porcelain complained. There's an odd power in watching someone try to be small, so you'll treat them gently. Most people wear their need for kindness like a badge. He had always expected mine. "I won't destroy you," I said. "I will make sure the outcome matches the evidence." He asked for privacy again. I let the recording run. It was my ledger. His voice was part of the entries. After he left, I listened to the recording twice. He sounded almost reasonable. That was the sting. Reasonableness makes wrongdoing feel negotiable. And negotiable was the thing I was not entertaining. That evening, I drove to the construction site where he'd put some of his eggs. A development project on the outskirts of town, half finished and always smelling faintly of ambition. The place was the sort of canvas that attracts men who measure success by square footage. This property had been his fantasy, luxury condos to sell to people with more money than boundaries. He'd invested time, swagger, and other people's optimism into it. It seemed appropriate to let him watch the place he'd imagined collapse in on itself in a way that didn't require violence. The site was a skeleton of concrete and glass, cranes like slow dinosaurs in the distance. A watchman sat in a trailer, his silhouette haloed by a glow-stick lamp. I drove slowly through the gate and parked at the edge of the unfinished road, not to confront, but to observe. There's a unique kind of spectacle in watching a man face his own construction. I was not alone. A car idled near the entrance, driver side window down. Hannah sat there, arms crossed, phone face lit. She looked younger and angrier than the photo shoots of her had suggested. The contrast between her Instagram curations and this living portrait was satisfying. Ethan pulled up moments later, rain finally deciding to enter the world in earnest. He stepped out, collar up, hair damp, and the three of us had the kind of accidental geometry that writes itself into scenes, him at the center, her to the side, me an intentional observer. They argued right there in the rain. Not loud at first, more like two people trying to explain themselves to someone who'd already decided the verdict. Then the voice levels rose. Phrases snapped like umbrella ribs. Hannah accused him of lies, of promises he'd made about the condo's stability. He accused her of being naive, of being an accessory to his errors. The argument had the feel of a dam giving way, not destructive, but exposing a current that had always been there. I did not intervene. I stood under the streetlight, umbrella damp at my side, and let the scene play out. For a long time, it felt cinematic in the sense that real life rarely resembles cinema. It's messy, halting, and utterly human. They were two people who'd connected in what they called the middle of life's traffic, and now traffic lights had turned against them. At some point, a security light blinked, and the site's alarm system reacted to water pooling in an electrical conduit. A fragility of infrastructure, a short circuit, became evident in a way that was loud and immediate. A cascade of sparks and a cascade of sprinklers that blew up like a sudden chorus. Water fell from the newly installed systems, igniting panic in that there's a certain kind of silence that only exists after a plan has already succeeded, but the target hasn't realized it yet. It isn't the silence of peace, or closure, or even exhaustion. It's the silence of inevitability. The part where the trap is already set, the paperwork is complete, the final turn has already been made, yet the other person still thinks they're in a negotiation. That's where we were. Ethan still believed there was a version of this story where he could smooth talk his way back into stability. Men like him don't fight, they persuade. They think words are currency and confidence is proof. And maybe that works on some people, but not on someone who already filed the paperwork, not on someone who already moved the money, not on someone who already stopped caring. The morning the divorce became official didn't feel cinematic. No lightning bolts, no dramatic music. The world didn't shift its axis. It just finalized. An email, a signature, a PDF labeled executed copy. And that was it. The marriage that once required vows, witnesses, rented seating, and professionally arranged flowers was dissolved with a digital timestamp and an attorney who probably had 3 more divorces to process before lunch. I sat at the kitchen table with coffee and read the email twice. Not because I doubted it, but because of how incredibly simple endings actually are once feelings are out of the way. Next email, from the financial advisor. Your accounts are now fully separated. Ethan Bennett is removed from all access and legal connection to your savings, investments, and credit profile. I took a slow sip. For months, he thought he was getting away with something. In reality, I was removing him from everything one signature at a time. The quietest kind of removal, the irreversible kind. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I felt organized. At 11:32 a.m., I checked the final item on my revenge list. Phase 3. Ensure he understands. Because here's the truth about betrayal. It isn't enough to expose it. The cheater must comprehend the consequences. Otherwise, they walk away thinking they were unlucky, not responsible. I didn't want Ethan to think he lost everything. I wanted him to realize he handed it away. That required a face-to-face, not to argue, not to scream, not to offer closure, just to let the outcome stand in front of him, fully assembled, while he understood that I didn't need the last word. I already had the last action, so I got in the car, drove downtown, and parked outside the unfinished condo project, the one he used to brag about, the one he paid for with shared money and lies disguised as business development. The building looked like him, expensive on the outside, hollow in the middle, scaffolding holding it up where structure should have been. His car was already there. Perfect. I didn't walk in like someone meeting an ex. I walked in like someone confirming delivery on a contract. He saw me before I spoke. He looked exhausted, like he'd been up all night trying to rehearse a speech that sounded reasonable. "Lila," he said, as if I'd materialized out of thin air. "Why are you here?" "Last step," I said, his eyebrows pulled together. "Last step of what?" "Your education." He let out a dry laugh. People do that when they think control might still be retrievable. "We already signed the divorce," he said. "You got what you wanted." "What more is there?" "Understanding," I said. "The part that requires no judge, no attorney, no witness, just clarity." He folded his arms like he was preparing for debate. "Clarity about what?" "That you're officially out of access. Financially, legally, narratively. You're talking like I'm a business account you closed." "That's exactly what you were," I said. "A shared expense I no longer needed." That landed. Not loudly, but deeply. I watched it settle into him like cold air under a door. "You don't have to be cruel," he said. "I'm not being cruel," I said. "Cruel would be letting you think any part of this was unfortunate instead of earned." His jaw tightened. "You can't just erase me." "I didn't erase you," I said. "I archived you. That's different. Erasing implies effort. Archiving is just putting something where it no longer affects anything important." He stared at me like he was still searching for the emotional version of me he used to manipulate. The version that cried. The version that made excuses for him. The version that believed love meant keeping quiet about disrespect. She was gone. And I didn't even miss her. Then, right on schedule, the tow truck entered the garage. He turned at the sound. I didn't. The driver nodded at me. I nodded back, simple, professional, a transaction in motion. When Ethan finally processed what was happening, his voice went sharp. Are they taking my car?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Repossession, payments missed, accounts frozen, standard procedure." "They can't do that," he snapped. "They can," I said, "and they are. You did this." "No," I said. "You did this when you spent joint funds on a condo you didn't own with a woman who doesn't answer your calls anymore." "I can fix this," he started. "No," I said. "You can't fix anything. That's the point. You've reached the part of the story where effort no longer matters." He stared at the car being hooked by the front tires, panic breaking through the last of his charm. "This is all over one mistake." "No," I said. "This is over 27 lies, 5 financial transfers, 2 hotel receipts, and 1 perfume-covered shirt you claimed was caused by a client hug. That's not a mistake. That's a hobby." He looked like someone realizing the exit door wasn't just locked. It had been removed from the building. "You're enjoying this," he said. "Yes," I said, not smiling, "because you finally get it." Then, just before the tow truck pulled away, I gave him the last line I owed him. "You claimed the perfume on your shirt was from a client hug. I sent you an invoice." And before he could form a reply, I turned, I walked away, and that was the end. Not loud, not chaotic, just final. The kind of ending that doesn't echo, because it doesn't need to. Walking away from him didn't feel like victory. It felt like accuracy. Like the final click in a lock that had been broken for a long time, now replaced with something new, something secure, something that no longer gave anyone a key but me. That's the part no one explains. Revenge isn't fire. It's clean edges. It's paperwork. It's clarity. It's the moment when your voice no longer shakes, not because you're healed, but because you're past the point of needing anything from the person who damaged you. Outside the building, the sunlight felt different. Not brighter, not symbolic, just unburdened. I stood there for a moment, watching the tow truck turn the corner with his car attached. The way a magician reveals a trick was actually just math the whole time. My phone buzzed. It was Spencer. "He's losing it. Just stormed into the office. He's yelling about sabotage and my wife hacked me." I typed back, "Tell him I don't hack. I document." No reply. Probably because Spencer was already calculating how fast he could distance himself from Ethan's downfall without getting any of it on his suit jacket. 5 minutes later, I got a group text from 2 women I barely tolerated, both of whom suddenly wanted to check in. "If you need anything, we're here for you." We always suspected something was off about him. Translation: we want front row seats, and we don't want to look like bad people while asking. I sent a single reply: "All good, already handled." If there is one sentence that kills gossip faster than a cease and desist letter, it's that one. Nothing disappoints the suburban audience like a woman refusing to fall apart on cue. On the drive home, I played a podcast. Not a self-help episode, not a healing through pain special. Just a true crime story about a woman who outsmarted a cult leader. The host called her emotionally strategic. I thought, that's the term. Not vengeful, not bitter, strategically emotional. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I already knew Ethan would try again. Not romantically, not lovingly, but logistically. Men like him don't want the relationship back. They want the access back. Sure enough, an hour later, call. I watched it ring, let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, text. We need to talk. You went too far. You can't just erase someone's life. Funny how quickly your overreacting turns into you destroyed me. I didn't answer. He called again. This time I picked up because sometimes silence is power, but sometimes letting the other person hear how calm you are is louder than shouting. Lila, he said, already on the edge of panic, we need to fix this. There is no we, I said. You ruined everything. No, I said. You ruined everything. I just filed the paperwork. You're ice cold. Thank you, I said. That took effort. You think this is funny? I think it's accurate. He exhaled like he expected me to soften, like there was still a version of this conversation where I would say, I didn't mean for it to go this far. There wasn't. Lila, I'm serious, he said. They're talking about removing me from the firm. You cost me my career. You cost yourself your career, I said. I just published the receipt. You're enjoying watching me fall apart. Not particularly. I just don't feel responsible for holding you together. You sound like a stranger. It took a long time, I said. But yes, that's exactly what I am now. He went quiet then, not the silence of reflection, but the silence of a man running out of strategies. And then he made the mistake they all make right before the end. You're going to regret this. Already did, I said. That's why I fixed it. End of call. I blocked his number. Not because I was emotional, because the final phase of revenge requires the clean removal of access. Communication, financial, psychological, and narrative. Revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about making them irrelevant. Later, as I was making dinner, I got a message from the financial advisor again. As requested, his name has now been removed from the condo loan. He is responsible for the remaining balance, owed in full. I stared at the sentence, appreciating its elegance. Responsible. In full. Being legally tied to a property he can't afford, with a woman who now wants nothing to do with him. That wasn't my revenge. That was math. And nothing humbles a man faster than the bank's tone changing from "Hi, Ethan" to "per policy." I scrolled back through the proof I collected, screenshots, timestamps, emails, and realized something. He didn't just lose a marriage. He lost his audience. He lost the version of himself he performed for me. And once that mirror was gone, so was the role. That's the part no one tells cheaters. They think they're living two lives, but they're really just renting one. And eventually, the landlord comes for the keys. Around 9 p.m., I took a walk through the neighborhood. Same lawns, same identical mailboxes, same people pretending not to peek through blinds. But there was a subtle shift now. Not pity, not judgment, recognition. I wasn't the woman who got cheated on. I was the woman who handled it. Neighbors nodded more politely. Someone on a porch raised a glass like we shared an inside joke. A teenager biking past whispered, "That's her." Not tragic, legendary. And the best part, I didn't even have to raise my voice, just my standards. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, not because I was anxious, not because my mind was racing, but because there was nothing left to prepare for. The plan wasn't in progress anymore. It was done. Set, signed, sealed, executed. People think revenge is this fiery high, like adrenaline, or caffeine, or rage. It isn't. It's clarity. It's the quiet sense that every move led exactly where it needed to, and there's no cleanup required afterward. I made breakfast, checked email, watered the plant on the windowsill. A domestically normal morning, except for the fact that somewhere across the city, a man was realizing his entire identity was now built on a foundation that wasn't just cracked. It was owned by someone else. At 10:14 a.m., I got the alert. Account ownership transfer complete. That was the final one. The condo loan now officially listed only him as liable, meaning full debt, his, tax responsibility, his, property insurance, his, monthly payments, his, immediate financial panic, also his. And the cherry on top, the mistress he co-signed with had already unfollowed him. You could almost put it on a t-shirt. Cheaters don't just lose love, they lose co-signers. 10 minutes later, an email from his accountant arrived, accidentally CC'd to me because Ethan still hadn't updated anything on time. We need to discuss the outstanding condo loan and the sudden account freezes. There is no way to restructure this without liquidating assets. Liquidating assets. That's the polished phrase rich men hear right before they stop being rich. I didn't reply. It wasn't my problem anymore. By noon, I was at a cafe, laptop open, acting like a person whose life wasn't currently the most viral cautionary tale of the year. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't licking wounds. I wasn't making a breakup playlist. I was designing a t-shirt. The front, invoice for emotional damages. The back, paid in full. Sometimes healing isn't a journal entry. Sometimes it's merchandising. While I was finalizing fonts, my phone buzzed. Not a call. A voice note. From Hannah, the mistress, the woman who tried to weaponize soft lighting and affirmations. I pressed play. Her voice shook, but not from regret, more from panic. Congratulations. You ruined him. I hope it was worth it. I didn't replay it. I didn't respond. There's something deeply satisfying about being accused of ruining a man by simply refusing to protect him from his own actions. At 2:40 p.m., I drove back to the condo site, not to speak to Ethan, not to watch the chaos, but because every story needs a final scene. Not a reconciliation, not closure, just placement, a physical bookmark in the story. He was already there. He looked worse than yesterday, hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled, posture collapsed, a man who'd run out of angles. He didn't speak first. That alone told me everything. When he finally did, the voice was hollow. Is there anything left? Yes, I said. The part where you understand. He nodded slowly, not in agreement, in defeat. Do you feel better? He asked. I feel accurate, I said. Then he asked the question every guilty person eventually reaches. Was any of it real to you? Of course, I said. It was real. Until you made it fiction. He looked at me like he wanted a different line, a softer ending, a crack in the armor. I let the silence answer. Then the tow truck turned into the garage. Different truck, same purpose. Not his car this time. His furniture. The staging furniture he bought for the condo, being repossessed. He watched it get rolled out. One lamp, one armchair, one meaningless attempt at a life he thought he could build on someone else's trust. That was when it hit him. I didn't just leave. I dismantled everything he built on borrowed foundation. And he said the only sentence left, when men like him reach the end of their vocabulary, you really don't care anymore. No, I said. Caring was expensive. I'm done overpaying. He closed his eyes like the world finally stopped spinning and landed exactly where it should have been all along. Beneath him, not beneath me. Lila, he said, one last try, one last rope tossed into a void. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said. That's the part you never understood. You always thought love meant wanting something from you. But the truth is, the most powerful moment isn't when someone wants more. It's when someone wants nothing. He didn't speak again. He understood. Not everything, but enough. Which was all I needed. I turned. I walked. No pacing, no hesitation, just movement. Away from the wreckage. Toward nothing dramatic, just away. Because the most devastating exit isn't a slammed door. It's a quiet one. The kind that doesn't wait for permission, the kind that tells the story without saying a word. And just before I stepped fully out of view, I gave him the only line I owed him, the line that ended us better than any apology or argument ever could. You claimed the perfume on your shirt was from a client hug. I sent you an invoice. And I didn't look back, because that was the ending.